which usually Lily has to remind me, but when I'm here solo, I seem to remember a little better. And welcome Sylvianne and Carolyn and Leslie and Lily. It's really sweet to have you gathering around with me tonight to talk about the moon. So we really have some intense moon cycles coming up, and it feels really awesome to have a circle to hold that. So here on Friday, we've got the new moon happening in 24 degrees Libra. And I know many of, several of you are in our frequencies class right now. And as you will discover later in the year, this frequency 24 is an especially intense frequency. It's one of the most intense frequencies of the zodiac. And what's really special about it is that it really does push us for a truer type of enlightenment. And it is a counterforce to a sort of premature kind of enlightenment that can perhaps sort of hold us back from getting to the gut of the matter in ways that we need to in order to really liberate ourselves. And what was really striking to me as I was looking at this upcoming lunar cycle is that it's not just this next new moon that's going to be in frequency 24, but it's also the next Scorpio new moon and the next Sagittarius new moon. So we have 3 lunar cycles in this frequency, and I didn't print charts for next year yet. So I'm assuming that the January new moon doesn't also occur in this frequency. But for those of you that have been traveling with me over the years, we did have that one year where frequency, I think it was 13 or 9, I can't remember which one it was, but I think we had like 6 lunar cycles in that same frequency.
I think it was 16.
Was it 16? Nice, Lily. I think you're right. Yep. And so it does put a pretty personal spin on this collective experience that we've all been having this year. So welcome, Sheridan. It's so good to see you. We got the Australian in the house. Yahoo.
Representing, yep.
Representing. Oh, and we have another Sheridan coming in. Okay, hold on. Let's move her over. So while we are having so many out of the ordinary experiences right now collectively, you know, most of us alive haven't ever experienced a pandemic before. While some people have, you know, most of us haven't. And that's just one example. Here in the United States, you know, people have had the experience now of not seeing the sunshine for a day. These are really out of the ordinary experiences. What I'm seeing as I look into these upcoming lunar cycles is that the personal aspect of that is going to become intensified. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. All of us are different. Where this is going to be in our charts is all going to be different. But I get the sense, especially with how the sun is going to be squaring all of these planets in Capricorn at the new moon, that the need for us to really understand spiritually how we actually navigate between ordinary and non-ordinary spaces is going to be receiving a lot of nourishment on some levels. And sometimes that nourishment doesn't always come in the predictable forms we want it to. So I'm feeling for myself that this next, we're also going through a Venus gateway. So just to back it up a little bit for those of you that may not be tracking with all of these things. So the Venus cycle also maps with the moon cycle. So coming up here on Wednesday, Venus is going to be conjuncting the moon. And we are going through a sort of collective rite of passage that has to do with moving into our hearts and really receiving a Venusian activation that brings in a lot of nourishment and also letting go in how we're able to come into a space within our own heart-centered nature that enables us to continue our own journey of deeper self-reflection and personal engagement. And because Venus holds so much nourishment for us, I'm really holding, as we go through that rite of passage and that gateway, to hone in on my own sense of self and my own sense of wholeness as a way to sort of gear up for what I'm seeing in these next lunar cycles. Because I think we're really going to need it. I think that experience of remembering how we are designed in a specific way that has its own perfection, and that in that sense of a grander design that may not always be in our perceptual understanding, but yet trusting that on a really deep level is just going to be an important foundation for heading into these next 3 lunar cycles. So let me just stop there and just see if there's any questions. And I apologize. I know I kind of had to take a step back there before I went forward, but it does feel important to note that this week, you know, we have these 2 different astrological happenings occurring. The first is with Venus on Wednesday, and then the second is the new moon that's happening on Friday. So I just want to make a pause there and just open it up to see if there's any questions about this kind of foundation I'm laying.
I have to apologize because I know I have a several second delay when I start talking, so be patient with me. I couldn't stand it. I had to look up the January new moon is happening at 23 degrees 13 minutes of Capricorn. So that's also in the 24 degree, right?
Yep,
yeah.
That's right.
Just, you know, where all that stuff's been happening with,
Wow, okay, so that means we have at least 4 happening in degree 24. And when we were studying, when Elias first channeled his take on these frequencies, that one couldn't even get recorded. It was like the energies just got so intense that out of all the 30 degrees, and going into the frequency of those degrees, that one just, we don't even have a recording of it. So it got piecemealed back together. So we have some understanding from people's notes and what got spoken, the intensity of that degree, but it did kind of blow out all the channels. And it just is an example of the kind of, just the kind of intensity and the bridging that seems to me to be what we're heading into with the lunar cycle. Yeah, thank you for looking that up, Sylviane. That also that takes care of that part of my mind too.
I have a question, Marcella. Yeah. What is the time frame? I may have missed this. The time frame for this intensity?
Yeah, well,
is it a week? Is it 3 months? What are
well, I mean, I think again, it's going to affect everyone differently, and it begins with this new moon on Friday in terms of the lunar cycle moving into this frequency of the zodiac. And what Sylviane just noted is that basically this cycle, this more intense lunar cycle that I believe is going to have, it's kind of going to bring all this that we've been traversing into the personal in a bit more real way than it may have been for many of us. It's going to start in 24 degrees Libra, then it's going to go to 24 degrees Scorpio, and then it's going to go to 24 degrees Sagittarius, and then it's going to be in 24 degrees Capricorn. So this intense frequency that I'm conjuring is basically going to go through all of those signs of the zodiac, giving us a very both collective and personal rite of passage that I strongly believe is going to help us learn how to bridge ordinary and non-ordinary reality in a new way on a personal level, which, as we've discussed, I think has a lot to do with the opening of our sensory systems, and that's a unique experience. So having circles like this right now is just feeling so nourishing to me because I really trust in the work that we've been doing to build a foundation to have these kinds of conversations and actually be able to explore what's really happening together. And then through that exploration, be able to kind of harness the cosmic
So the
rite
time,
of passage being woven for us.
the time frame depends on the individual. Is that what you said?
Well, I think the impact depends on the individual, but the time frame is starting Friday and it's going to go at least through January.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
February.
Oh, well, at least through February.
February.
Yeah. Okay. What? Yeah. So,
I
oh
just
yeah, that's right.
looked no, I just looked it up. It's going to be at 23 degrees something minutes Aquarius in February.
Okay. So we're having another one of these years.
23.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sylvia.
A question around that, because I remember the last time we had that 16-degree frequency, there was also a string of 0-degree full moons, which was almost like an oxymoron because it was the beginning of the cycle, but it was a full moon. And it was really interesting and unique, and there was a lot of activation. And I think this full moon this month is on Halloween, but I think Alpha Omega is really implicated. It reminds me of my little guy. You know, there seems to be like almost like a pair. So if you think of the 24 degrees, do you think the full moon is playing a role too? And there's like almost a ping pong with like you know, the offsetting degree, because usually when it's always one for the new moon, the full moon kind of follows that pattern with a different degree frequency, right?
Yeah. And they don't always map perfectly though. So I don't have, well, let's see, I have all the charts here. Because yeah, the full moon is going to be in 9 Taurus this month. And I was kind of going into that to just get a sense of what, it's always nice to look at the different phases of the moon when we're trying to grok the cycle itself. But it doesn't appear to me that the next full moon is in, well, it is, yep. And then the full moon after that is in 9. Yep, they're going 9s too.
So the other one was like 0 and 9, and how I look at it is like a culmination number. So do you think there's something, you know, completing that cycle? I don't know, but it's just interesting that we're having another string of numbers like over and over at such really an intense or even more intense time, right? And so this new moon is just part of a whole orchestra of things going on in the sky. So it's going to be, I think, really, really interesting, to say the least, to see what these bring forward.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. And
a lot of what I've heard coming up is releasing a lot of karmic things. I've heard that come up like to me in many different places. I don't know if some of that's been coming through to you, that there's this point of release here with this new moon that's very unusual and more potent than even what we normally have in a dark phase of the moon this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like in general, we're doing a huge purification and purging right now, and that it's actually really important to remember that a lot of what is playing out and a lot of what we are seeing is shadow. And if we think about, you know, what I continue to kind of bring forward, the accumulation of karma, you know, that's happened since the start of civilization that is now wanting to be cleared and shed while these foundations basically fall apart, you know, right before our eyes. And as they're falling apart, we're seeing the collective shadow come before us that is both a product of our making in many ways, which we really do have to own. You know, as creative beings, this is a product of our making. And at the same time, cleave toward the light, like cleave toward the light and the vision and the dream on the inside, while we actually become responsible creative beings and understand that we are a part of this drama that's playing out, each in our own individual and unique ways. And it is of the utmost for us to stay super aligned and tuned in to what piece of that story is ours to work out, and let go of the other pieces so that the energies are there and available for other people to work out. And that piece of knowing where we truly have to do our work, I think is very important. And as we come into this lunar cycle, I haven't looked at the cycles ahead too deeply, but just focusing on this one coming up, what I love about seeing that the full moon is in 9 degrees Taurus is that there is this collective coming together back into that essential place of essence, and remembering that there is a purity to each and all. And that despite the shadow and the things that we do have to clear and purify and work out, there is a grand purity and there is an essence that is attached to a much greater dream and is living and life-giving in a much greater way than those errors and those mistakes and the fall, the true fall of the potential that we carry inside of us. So I think the shedding process is definitely here. So I definitely would echo that message. I think from my take on how Libra 24 is going to work out, I also want to note it's on the fixed star of Spica. And that's definitely another piece to be working with here in terms of fixed stars. I don't work with all the fixed stars. Elias didn't work with all the fixed stars, but Spica is one of them that he works with, and that has been passed through this particular astrological tradition. And Spica is a tricky one, so I feel that sense of, okay, get ready for the mischievous energies that work in strange ways. I personally feel especially on guard because I'm the kind of person that gets strong messages, but I don't yet have the maturity to always distinguish where they're coming from. So I'm the one that in my 20s, shows up to the ceremony having gathered some totally like invasive weed because it was so beautiful to me and it started talking to me. And so I pulled my car over and put a bunch of it in my car and traveled to a beautiful place with this invasive species of a plant because it was so loud and I couldn't resist the call. I couldn't resist the call of the plant to be with me and to be a carrier of its vision. But its vision is not aligned with my vision, and I didn't have the maturity to distinguish. So I wish I could say in the last 15 or 16 years that I trusted myself a lot more in this area. But quite honestly, having kids and a family and doing the work and expressing myself just in the way I am, I have not developed that skill in a way that I feel a super great sense of trust. So I personally, when I look at Spica, I feel on guard for my own sense of mindfulness, that being spiritually open doesn't necessarily make me of higher service. Being spiritually open can make me a great place for an undiscriminating energy, to come in and wield its own kind of magic. So I'm grateful not everyone is working with that, but I do share that humbly because I do believe that in this time of great awakening and opening, we all are learning how to work with new sensory systems. So that's one I'm definitely feeling like I really want to be much more mindful and let this rite of passage grow me in my awareness and my mindfulness to be able to stop and learn some of those past lessons. Like, what is that talking to me? And is that what I want to flow with? And there are going to be perfectly aligned, crystallized messages that we get that might just be off. And that's going to be okay. And that's going to be how we get brought through this coming into our own nature and our own being at another level of awareness and growth. So it does feel like a special time to be able to walk mindfully, to be able to have graciousness and a lot of self-compassion for the errors and the mistakes, not just the ones that we've made lifetimes ago, but for the ones we're going to make right now. And know that actually we are growing and we can't control the growth process. It's not going to be perfect. And we have a few cycles here, to kind of work with some of these energies and get a deeper grounded, rooted trust in in what we are and what's happening. Yeah, go ahead, Lily.
Something about that 24 degree, I just want to mention, because my moon is at 24 Capricorn, and Pluto has been sitting on that degree for the past year. And also Saturn and Pluto had their conjunction at the end of January on that degree.
Yeah.
And that was super intense. Like, I saw it coming, I knew about it. And the day that it hit was really devastating in my life. It was super traumatic, and it sent me on a trajectory of transformation and reclaiming my sense of self this whole year that I'm still working through. So that 24 degree, it's at the end of soul and right before the spirit degrees, right? In the frequencies. Yeah. So maybe that's part of it. It's like it's holding the highest soul frequency possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this moon is now squaring that Pluto. So too.
Yeah. Thank you for weaving that in. I didn't remember that conjunction happened there. It sounds like you wouldn't forget.
And there's also Jupiter and Pluto coming at it again in mid-November at that same point.
Yeah. Holy gosh. Well, I mean, the beauty of it, right, is that, like Lily is pointing out, it's in these soul frequencies, and my sense is that whatever stories, especially soul stories, and I don't even know if I have the capacity to distinguish between stories and soul stories, but the feeling I get of that distinction of soul stories is that in that frequency, it's like it's gonna push that story to the very limit that it can go as a way for us to transcend it. So the bankrupt stories that we tell ourselves are gonna get revealed. And there's a freedom and there's a liberation in that. And there is a way sometimes that our minds and our hearts, they can't quite get the intensity of a lesson in the same way that we need it until we fully dramatize it. And we almost have to experience it in the same proportion of intensity that it lives inside of us on a soul level. It's like a matching of intensity. So it makes me nervous, y'all. It really does. I can tell I'm feeling a little nervous about it just because I know how I work. So, but I also feel a tremendous relief at the same time, because I know there's places where I'm caught, and I know there's places where I'm living some bankrupt strategies. And I know that that there's a part of my ego that's just gonna keep doing it until it can't do it anymore. And it feels like time is up from an astrological perspective, that if you've been able to get away with that through this year so far, then this is it. This is like, the deep tissue massage going right into that place, going, all right, come on, we're going to coax this part out of you too, because who you are is not that story. And what is coming next is being hindered by all of this that's in the way. So I'm definitely feeling both the intensity of and then also just a real deep exhale of, well, thank God something's going to come put pressure on those places that are so damn stubborn and holding on and, clever enough to get away with it up to this point. And honoring that some of those things are why we are here. It isn't just an egoic strategy. It's actually a soul story. It's why we've incarnated. So there is a distinction here in terms of the stories we tell ourselves. And these soul stories that are associated with this frequency are a deeper level of story. And so I think it is a little harder to differentiate those belief systems or old ways of being that are connected to those stories, because it is a little bit of a different level of story than just the personality pieces that we've been developing in this particular lifetime. Let me just stop there to see if there's any other inputs or feedback.
It seems to tie into what I think Carolyn was saying about the clearing the karma, the ancestors' karma. Did someone mention that? I know someone mentioned clearing karma. I'm not sure if the ancestral thing came in there, but that seems to be a real key. There's a lot of stuff out there in the ether right now about ancestors, and there's a revitalization of an interest in ancestors, and particularly for those of us who really are a product of modern culture and do not have any kind of indigenous or earth-based religious connection to ancestry. It's really very interesting to see the need to reclaim that as part of our need to return to earth and to an earth understanding, instead of this kind of ascendant God, Father in the heaven type attitude that the modern Western culture's carried around for 2,000 plus years. So that whole return to the ancestors, it's a very interesting theme, and it feels to me that it's tied into this 24 frequency and those soul stories. And, you know, what kind of soul stories are we carrying around? And quite recently I've discovered that my great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland as a 20-year-old, you know, fresh from the Irish famine, and just dug in straight away and started working like a crazy, and died at the age of 49 after a heart attack while ploughing, you know, a bit of land. and I sometimes think about that, because I've got that same kind of let's just keep working attitude, that I find is such a safety. It's such a safe place for me to keep going back into. It's very distracting, stops me thinking about the stuff I don't want to think about, keeps me busy, makes me feel useful and therefore valuable, and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And it's been a year of really intense work schedule for me. So as you're saying all of that, Marcella, I don't have any 24 frequency or positions in my chart. However, you know, it is really interesting. Obviously, you know, it's not even that simple. There's a lot more complexity in it than that. It is really interesting to think about it at that level of healing ancestral stories of worthiness and value and function. And yeah, and for me, a really strong theme that's also coming through is the healing of the masculine. There's been a lot of talk of healing of the feminine, but there's masculine healing that's required, you know, and the whole work principle is deeply part of that. And that whole idea of we will solve all our problems and save the world by working. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reading that in, Sheridan. It's yeah, it just hits me on so many different levels. And I think you're right. I think it's when we are talking about these soul stories, those ancestral things do come in with a different kind of weight, because that definitely, based on whatever beliefs you might hold around, you know, how we choose to incarnate and the families we choose to incarnate, I do believe that there is an echoing of our own individual piece as it gets concretized inside of that family structure. And yeah, I do have the 24 in my chart as well, my Vesta in the 12th house. So it's interesting. There's a couple of us. Sky also has that degree in his chart in our household. And it is interesting at how that is one of the more stuck places, where I'm just not really able to budge right there. I really have it that it's going to serve to be holding a pretty narrow view of how things need to be for that part of me to exist in a certain way. And I wanted to draw out another thing that you said, Sheridan, about also the ascendant part, because I actually think that part of what this 24 frequency does is that it almost forces us to have an ascension experience that isn't like a premature enlightenment experience, but it's much more of a deep opening that occurs because it has to, because we can't go forward in the way that we have. We have to draw on something new. And that's where incarnating the stucker parts of the soul story help us to be able to also transcend them. So I think that it is important to recognize that while we're talking about the intensity of this frequency, that the point of it is that it draws out its equal and opposite through the process of incarnating it, so that we actually have something real to open into based on our own need to evolve, based on our own need to actually draw forth a real illumination, a real truth, something that is meeting the potential in us, in a way that really activates. And I want to go into this star spark a little bit, because I think it's more fun than some of what I've been sharing about, because frequency 24 is what it is, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job of capturing it. But Libra 24 on Spica, also, again, I kind of drew out the mischievous part of it, but I want to bring forward some of the other qualities, because I think they do illustrate the magical part of what this cycle also holds for us. Let's see, let me start here. The rapture, the indescribable multi-sensation of being able to be everywhere, anywhere, everybody, anybody, nobody. The wildly impossible state of being cast loose from all forms to drift and metamorphose and try on for size whatever's out there or in here. As loose as can be, as willing and able as the most flexible body soul this world can allow, not limited in imagination, in conception, or in being able to visualize and stay alive to the formative aspect of life purely, spontaneously, brilliantly. To be this way is to be free. Nothing accumulates. No patterns can gather habitual grooves. Instead, the life force breathes into its own element of wish and stretch and go there right now. And of course, the world says, of what use is this? And of course, the worlds say, come join us, be as we are. And of course, we go through that and we keep on going. Nothing sticks. No advice, no good intentions, no imported philosophies work around here. The only thing that does is to follow that breath, that impulse. When we do, it keeps on tuning us into all the ways we want to be. If we get real good at it, then we discover something else, a whole new world. We come back to the place where we started out. We remember what it was like to be pristine, direct, wide open. We recapture the essence of the one place we cannot ever deny. Once we do become lucid in this dream, we can, without fear or hesitation, invite everybody else to partake, to catch some of the magic, uniting in a truly fluid life path. We have nothing else to offer. In the tuned out, socialized version, we are a sad excuse for a world renewing force. We take on anything and everything, hardly knowing why. If we do dream deeper, if we can restore the inner place, if we can remember back to where it all began, suddenly it will jump out at us from the future and surprise us with what we were missing, what we failed to notice. While we were gone, something very beautiful was slipped in here, something worth moving with. So I feel like we're kicking off this intense journey with noting that there is a brilliance There is an imaginative dream that's inside of us, and that this time is a time of renewal, and the outer planets are really helping to bring forward some of that renewal energy for us as we, are moving towards the end of this year. And the personal parts, we might feel it, we might feel the places where we've been telling ourselves some good old lies that want to be upended. And in that process, we do have a tremendous well of resource to be able to shape shift, to be able to call upon other parts of our nature that have been underserved and haven't been coming out to play. And that process can really allow us to become a force that brings in the new, rather than one that perpetuates the old.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please, Leslie.
First of all, I don't have the 24 degrees in my chart either, but what you just read speaks to me so much. It sounds like the magical child, the mystic child that's coming back to life. But I wanted to piggyback on what Sheridan said. I was listening to the Collective Trauma Summit 2 weeks ago, and 108,000 people signed up for this thing, which is a huge amount for a summit. They had 70,000 last year and 108,000 this year. But it was all about the ancestors. It was all about how we've gotten disconnected from our bodies and from nature. And what you said, Marcel, too, brought back a line that someone said, we have to have a taste of what can be in order to move forward towards it, because otherwise we just keep getting sucked back into this trauma. The trance of normalcy is the trance of trauma. We don't know that we've been in this constricted state for in our entire life until you get this opening, and it's like, oh my God. And what they did say is that it can scare the crap out of us at first when we have this opening, but then if we can just keep, it's like taking in the good and sort of repattering the nervous system and the brain and all that sort of thing, and just keep sort of breathing it in and then grow that instead of getting sucked back in. And then what you read too, I think this week or next week, the Shift Network is doing a dream summit. And it's all about lucid dreaming, and it's all about the non-ordinary and the ordinary worlds and how they blend together, and that they're not so separate like we think they are. So it's just, I'm blown away how everything that's been out there is also what you're just bringing to it now. I'm hoping that we're on the cusp and the wake up is right around the corner.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for weaving that in, Leslie, both this reference point to trauma and also just the support that's out there right now. We are living in this most incredible time. It's just mind-blowing at how much we can be supported, both, information-wise, and also, like, really think about how much foundation has been laid to midwife people through this journey and through this process, and what resource we have to give each other during this process. It's really, it really is striking. And when you were sharing that example about trauma, I just, like, I could feel it in my body, the way that, like, when a child is learning the difference between crawling and walking, like that's a huge different way to navigate, but there's something natural about the evolutionary process. And when I think about this difference between operating from within our context of trauma, which many of us have some parts of us that are still operating with trauma if it hasn't been freed, and as some people, God bless them, are not operating within those same contexts. But it almost can feel like the difference between walking and flying. It's like, oh, this is how I can navigate. Whoa, I had no idea. But it can be a little scary when you're on the edge of that cliff and someone tells you it's okay, you can fly, because all you've known is walking. So, our capacity to trust, I think is really, just what an incredible art, like what an incredible art and inner art trust is. And that feels like an important piece to this whole happening, is where is our relationship to trust as an inner art?
Add one more piece to this.
Yeah.
The trust, and trusting synchronicity, and trusting that there's a larger plan. Like my family, they don't want to talk about the ancestral trauma at all. They don't want to go there. That, you know, that's fine, Leslie, if you want to do that. We don't want to do that. But the synchronicity was one of my nieces got an assignment from her school, from a Spanish teacher, to do the genealogy of our family. So my brother started doing a group text, and my mother's parents were from Italy, my father's parents were from Scotland, and all of a sudden, that because of the niece getting the exercise from school, we're talking about the family inherited trauma. And it was right when the collective trauma, I'm getting goosebumps here, right when the collective trauma summit was going on, I'm like, see, I didn't even have to do anything. She gets assigned it, and now it's all, the purging is coming.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty, it really is palpable how much this ancestor work is, it really is revigorating the energetics. It's like a collective prayer has gone up, and the amount of the amount of spiritual resource that it seems is sort of supporting the momentum and the cycle of life to be rewoven. Just even with your example, Leslie, of it being a child, a young one, right? And it just feels like it's really coming around.
I just want to add to this. I love that the ancestors are brought in, because I'm feeling that so strongly, that the pool of the ancestors, but from what we're talking about, there's like cellular, if you want to call it at that level, there's these like lingering traumas that aren't our own, and stories that aren't our own that we're carrying. And so like that opening wide open is really, and mentioning the multiple generations that are feeling it, it's like healing our lines forwards and backwards. So I think the ancestors are here kind of cheering us on to do this and go through this intense astrology. I think part of what's triggering it is, you know, I think last week Mars was squaring the Capricorn trio, and then this week the sun is doing the same thing. So we've got this constant activation, you know, first that, you know, with Mars, and now with our sun, with the sun, that it's happening. But I had this interesting experience where I've had a dream that's come to me before that's really disturbing. And I feel like what you're saying, you know, what we're saying is like these memories are coming up, and there's a chance to release them and, you know, purify them, as you were saying. And I did a reading, an astrology and card reading for my friend's daughter who was 20. And I kept drawing the butterfly, kept on coming through for her. And she said, I'm actually terrified of butterflies. I don't like them. And I said, well, maybe there's this invitation to face your fear, because why don't you like butterflies? And I feel like that's coming up for all of us. Like in my dream, there was something that I'm afraid of, but it's coming to light in this energy. And there's something about the ability to face our fears and understand our fears, and then maybe release them, because maybe they're not even our fears. And I think that's part of, but it is like I really like what you said about listening to what's coming through, because so much is around to come through, and to know that not everything coming through may be in our best interest or aligned with where we're looking, because there's just a lot going on. So it's a very, very intense time, I feel.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. That was really, yeah, it's really beautiful to just hear each person's reflection around how this is affecting them and what they're seeing. And I do think there is a freedom too in what you're pointing out, that through the dream world and even through our living experience, to remember that we're having a living experience that is connected to many other experiences, some of which are not our own, and to be able to have both a committed, incarnated experience of aliveness, which allows us to fully have our experience, while also having the awareness that some of those experiences have been imprinted on us, and some of those experiences are being lived through us, can sometimes help us actually be able to see it from a place that helps us clear it, because it does make it a bit less personal. And it's a tricky dance. You know, it's a tricky dance. We can't get so separated out so that you go into, I think the Buddhists call it Godhead, where you could just kind of see everything from a perspective that doesn't, or prevents you from experiencing it. That's not always the best way to actually live and clear things. But in what Carolyn is sharing about her dream, to be able to acknowledge that something is coming through that, and that she has potentially right now, as a living being, as one of her ancestors that's incarnated, she has power in the living experience that none of her ancestors have anymore. They have other kinds of power. They have other kinds of influence. There's all of these other ways they can weave into the web of life, but they are not physically incarnated in a human body, having the human experience of dreaming like Carolyn is. That is unique to Carolyn. And what's coming through her may or may not totally be unique to her. And these are areas of mystery. And that's why this is a mystery school. I can't tell you what that and how that occurs. I know I have had beings come through my dreams that are not my consciousness, and that scared the shit out of me. You know, that's not a comfortable place to be in, to have to claim your psychic space for your own experience, because those non-incarnated beings want to have access to this plane. And if they can do it through me or you or Carolyn or Sheridan, and that's part of, as we move into the bright future of the multidimensionality, it isn't that there also aren't counterbalances too of our maturity to be able to have discrimination, just like with the plant that wanted to travel with me, those things that want to dream through me, not all of them are allowed in my space. So as you can see, I'm an example here of someone who's working on boundaries, discrimination and boundaries. This is my body and my experience, and I am a vessel into physical reality. Some things can come through me, but I am going to be a gatekeeper, just like Gandalf, right? You cannot pass. This beast lives on that side. It does not get to come through here. That's a work in process, and I just believe that all of us are getting those really strong rites of passage to teach us how to work with ordinary and non-ordinary reality. It's really whole new understandings coming into play here that is requiring a whole new level of skill. As the cat jumps up behind Kara.
The other thing that's interesting about that is that the full moon falls on what's traditionally the Day of the Dead, or All Hallows, All Souls. So that kind of ties into the theme as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that too. It does feel very, well, you know, it feels like a really great movie playing out in a way that someone's designed it so that it gets to have extra emphasis, extra emphasis in the storytelling. Well, are there any other comments? I had one other piece of this new moon that I was going to weave in, if there aren't any more comments on this, where we've been hanging out now.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, please, Sheridan.
I'm not very proficient on Zoom. I find it hard to jump in and take my turn. Well, I wanted to share, for one thing, my feelings. I'm absolutely terrified, when you say there might be another 3 months, because I feel like I've been in what people have been describing and what you described astrologically for a couple of months already now. And so in addition to being terrified and feel like I'm already kind of pressed to my limit, I am, in the last 2 months, awarenesses and new ways of being have been coming in fast and furious. And I really enjoy, I do the dream work. I do the deep dive journeys, sometimes almost daily. And it's such a surprise, you know, where they go. Yesterday, you were talking about matching intensity. I forget your other words, but and I was offered one of the places I went that I was drumming, which I have a drum, but it's not a regular practice for me. And it said, well, if you want, you said, be proactive in visioning, moving towards your light vision. And my guide said, if you want that, you need to drum pretty hard and vision every day.
Mm.
And so at least in my, you know, sort of terror, because I feel like I'm already hanging on by my fingernails, you know, I have that. And also it was my new decade birthday yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday, Sheridan.
Yeah. And it was really sweet. I had no inner energy. And so I was actually amazed, you know, at how it all unfolded. It was so beautiful. And one of the things that I, in my dream, is watch the magical synchronicities. And so my birthday was yesterday. This morning I'm meditating on my bed and I hear through my window, just, I could barely hear it. So it was almost like, did I really hear that? And then I realized I did. From a neighboring apartment building, I heard, happy birthday to you. So that's another thing that helps me, you know, take things moment to moment and hang on is, you know, these magical synchronicities are speaking to me all the time, all the time. Yeah. And if anyone has anything to offer to as support, I'm absolutely ready to take it in. Oops, lost you there. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Sheridan, for just opening your experience and your feelings of the terror and the feeling of just already being in it and imagining what could it look like if I'm in it for any longer, if I'm already kind of, you know, with my nails on the cliff, like how long can I hang here? As I don't think that you're alone. I think there are quite a lot of people that are been pushed already pretty far to the brink of what they feel like they can stand. So I thank you for sharing that. And I also just want to welcome everyone too, that you can use the chat too. If you want to send Sheridan messages, you can send Sheridan messages that way. And I'm also willing to keep the line open for a little bit after we're done with the lunar musing too, if folks want to stay on. But I also just wanted to comment based on what Sheridan is bringing forward, that there is a piece of identification that shows up in this frequency as well. And I think part of the journey and part of the process is, and not to sound like a broken record, but it is learning how to identify with the part of us that has trust, and learning how to notice the part of us that is terrified because it has no idea how it's going to exist in whatever is coming up next, or it has no idea how to navigate, and continuing to find and notice where and what we identify with, and trusting that there is this greater process happening that we don't have to understand. And actually, the part of us that thinks it understands is usually one of the mischievous parts, even though it can be comforting. that the greater process is teaching us to learn to trust in something greater, and knowing that at some point something new is going to show up and hold us. And until that happens, it's going to be uncomfortable and it may be super scary. And there's probably not a lot that's going to change it on a primal level, you know? Like it reminds me when the trees start budding here because the weather's been too warm, but it's like we haven't gone through winter yet. It's like, what's going to happen to all those buds? Something is really wrong. Like my primal body feels that as like, that's just not repairable. And yet, crazy enough, the winter comes, the snow melts, those buds are still there and the process continues. So I just think there's a lot of dramatic, yeah, pieces of cycles that are changing right now. Okay, so I'm going to just throw in this last bit because it feels, well, let me just see. Actually, does it feel, is this going to serve? It's not going to serve to do what I was thinking of doing, but what I want to do instead is just say that as we come into the full moon in this cycle, I think there is a profound way that some of the mental gremlins, you know, that kind of get in the way of our authentic spiritual nature are gonna get exposed in a new way. And I'm really looking forward to that because I actually think it's like one of the pieces of the process that we're going through is, you know, is learning how to turn around some of those distorted mental programs that have kind of invaded our system. You know, they're unnatural, they're not organic. They're kind of anti-life. You know, we have some anti-life programming that isn't organic to our nature. And I do believe that this cycle is going to help expose that in a way that helps us cleanse and clear and actually feed more of the organic pieces of what we are and who we are as a species as we come into these all of this crazy astrology that's coming up over the next 3 months. Here so I can see you all. So that's what I have for my Southern Vermont perch of full colors at their peak right now, saturated and super life-giving. And I hope I didn't terrify anyone too much more than I terrified Sheridan. I also have to admit, Sheridan, I am definitely having that teeter-totter experience of like, what is going to hold me through this? I mean, that's really it for me. Is like, what do I have that's going to help hold me through this? And I actually feel called to, Lily, on that note, to bring you forward. Can you give us one anecdote of what held you through that activation that you had earlier in this year, even though that day might not have been the medicine that held you through, but what is the medicine that came out of that? Because your living experience could be such a contribution to the whole of things right now.
So much has come out of that, and mainly it's a reorientation away from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth, and reorienting to aligning with wholeness. And instead of, like, my whole life I've gone outside of myself to seek my worth, to have it reflected back to me, and I've been so disappointed and frustrated. And I'm being turned now to align with my own sense of worth. And it's like a foreign concept to me. It's nothing that I'm familiar with really in my own sense of being, but I'm trusting enough from this process to know that it'll be shown to me as long as I turn my intent in that direction. And that's a big key right there, is just to have the intent to heal forward. Like, we're so trained to heal the past, and that's necessary. It's definitely necessary, personally and collectively, to come to terms with, like, today, you know, we can't celebrate Columbus. You know, he was a genocidal greedy bastard, you know. But we can celebrate Indigenous people, and we can celebrate our ancestors that bring, you know, that we can bring through the lineage that's been lost. So, but reorienting towards healing is really what I'm bringing through, is just this, like being in the moment. I don't have to go search for it. It's in my breath. It's in my heartbeat. It's in my connection with the earth. If I can breathe down into the earth and connect with it, then I can receive clarity and wisdom. And the drumming, Sheridan, Gray drums every morning. He's drumming right now. He drums every evening. And it's all shamanic. It's all to connect with his sense of self. And yeah, so just to strengthen that connection with the earth and with our own breath, our own bodies. And that to me brings the clarity and the healing.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lily. Thank you so much. And I actually want to close with a song. And then again, I'll keep the line open. So Sheridan, if you want to stay on, if anyone else wants to stay on just to support each other and give love back, then we can do that. I'm not exactly sure who wrote this song. And I do want to acknowledge the beautiful New England women's community that I learned it from, and Lainey Goodman and Elisa Starkweather and all of those sisters that have been carrying forward such amazing, amazing circle songs. And I'm not sure who wrote this one. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Hold my hand, sisters. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers. Hold my hand. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Hold my hand, sisters. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers. Hold my hand. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Deep into the earth I go. Deep into the earth I know. Hold my hand, sisters. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers. Hold my hand. So thank you all for coming together. Thank you all for being earth vessels that can hold these streaming, stellar, cosmic stories in a way that can benefit our own growth and the growth of those around us. May we feel the love and the trust, and may we have the courage to feel the terror and the fear. May we take all of the energy that's been shared tonight and really allow us to deepen and grow and trust and feel the joy and the ecstasy that is living side by side with all of the things that we are reconciling within ourselves and outside ourselves. So many blessings to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, everyone. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.